It was a gray morning. The sky, which I had assumed would be a soft white like it always was, hung heavy with low clouds. Even though there was light, it felt dull and distant, like the air itself carried too much weight. The steam from the kitchen barely reached the living room, and the usual clinking of dishes seemed muffled, as if the walls of our house were trying to swallow all the sounds. Ethan wasn't there. On the table, his coffee cup from last night sat untouched, a ring of coldness gathering at the bottom. I hadn't cleaned it. I couldn't, not after what happened. We fought last night. No, it wasn't even a fight, not at first. It started with something so trivial. He left the television too loud, and I asked him to turn it down. Then he complained I never put away the newspapers. The kind of things couples say all the time. The kind of things we've said 1,000 times before. But this time, something inside both of us cracked. Years of unsaid things, of tiny heartaches brushed under the rug, of distance and fatigue we refused to name, it all rushed out at once. Like a dam breaking. I told him, then do whatever you want, and he spat, you're always like this. So damn controlling. That was the last thing we said to each other. The silence afterward was unbearable. It wasn't just quiet, it was a silence that seeped into the cracks of the house. A silence that wrapped around our chairs, our bedsheets, the hallways we passed through without looking at each other. And yet that morning, I still made breakfast. Miso soup, grilled salmon, warm rice. His portion, like always. My body moved out of habit more than intention. The kind of routine you don't just stop after 30-some years of marriage. My hands knew what to do even when my heart didn't. But he didn't come. His door stayed closed. I sat alone and ate in silence. The food was tasteless. My mouth moved, but there was no hunger, only habit. I looked around the room, this room, where our daughter once cried when she scraped her knee, where we laughed, holding our first grandchild, where I once leaned on Ethan's chest and felt the safety of a whole life ahead. And now silence, again. Not the gentle silence of a peaceful morning, but the kind that isolates you. I stepped out to get the newspaper. The air outside was cooler than I expected. Autumn, I thought. It's really coming now. A thin strip of blue broke through the clouds. But it felt too bright for my heavy heart. I closed my eyes and breathed in deep, wishing I could exhale the weight I carried. Would the silence continue today, too? Or would something, somehow give? When I came back inside, Ethan was sitting at the table. No words, just the rustle of the newspaper in his hands. The faint clink of his reading glasses being adjusted. His face was unreadable, but I could feel it, his mind wasn't really following the words on the page. His eyes moved, but they weren't absorbing. I stood by the counter for a moment, bowl in hand, watching him. I wanted to say something. Be careful, the miso soup is hot. Something I'd said every morning for years. But the words caught in my throat. I held out the bowl, and he took it without a word. Our fingers brushed slightly. That was the only sound, the brief, hollow click of ceramic against wood. We ate together, like strangers. I had added a little more dashi to the tamagoyaki, knowing he liked it that way. But he didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't say. The silence was worse than anger. At least with anger, there's connection, an emotional thread. But this, it was like he wasn't even there. I watched him. His hands, those hands that once held mine during childbirth, trembling but firm. The same hands that gently wiped sweat from my forehead when I was ill, that cut the backyard hedges every spring, that used to rest on my back at night with such quiet tenderness. Now, they moved mechanically, picking up chopsticks, folding the newspaper, avoiding my gaze. I reached out to take his dish when he finished, and he flinched slightly, as if surprised I was still there. I should have said it then. I'm sorry, but I didn't. My mouth opened and closed, and the moment passed. Later that day, I went upstairs to get out the winter clothes. The seasons were changing. I could feel it in the soft heaviness of wool against my fingertips. As I pulled sweaters from the back of the wardrobe, the room still smelled faintly of summer, sun-dried sheets, and maybe a hint of jasmine. That's when I heard the sound. A thud, heavy, unmistakable, followed by silence. My heart stopped. Ethan? No answer. I flew down the stairs. My legs were trembling as I reached the bottom. He was there, on the floor by the entryway, glasses knocked askew, one hand gripping his side. "Ethan." I dropped to my knees beside him. My hands trembled as I touched his shoulder. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide, not in pain, but in surprise. As if he hadn't expected me to care. Or be there. "I just slipped," he muttered. "It's nothing." It wasn't nothing. I saw the way his jaw clenched as he tried to rise. I slipped my arm under his and helped him up slowly. That's when it happened. For the first time in what felt like years, he took my hand. Really took it, held it, firm and trembling all at once. And I couldn't hold back the tears. That hand, that touch, that warmth, all the years, the arguments, the laughter, the failures, the intimacy, they all lived in that one moment. I didn't need to say I was sorry. I just held his hand tighter. And he held mine, too. That evening, the house felt different. Ethan lay on the sofa, his back propped with a pillow. One leg stretched out, moving slowly, gingerly. I searched through the medicine cabinet in the kitchen, an old metal box we'd had since our daughter was in school, and found a cooling patch and a mild pain reliever. I carried them back to the living room, my footsteps softer than usual. He was staring at the television, though it was clear he wasn't really watching. His gaze passed right through the screen. I sat beside him and opened the patch quietly. "Show me your back," I said. My voice came out softer than I intended. He turned to me, not saying a word, but the corners of his mouth twitched, ever so slightly. Slowly, he leaned forward, allowing me to lift the hem of his shirt. There, near the base of his spine, a bruise was beginning to bloom, deep red, already turning purple at the edges. I pressed the patch gently onto the skin. That's when his hand found mine. He didn't grip it tightly. He didn't speak. He just placed his hand over mine, warm and still. "Thank you," he murmured. His voice was hoarse, almost unfamiliar in its fragility. That was all it took. Tears welled in my eyes, but I held them back. Instead, I laced my fingers through his. Not like strangers, not like old lovers, like something in between, delicate and raw. I had spent decades with this man. Raised children, buried parents, paid off a mortgage, fought over bills and birthdays and broken promises. And still I had forgotten how to touch him. So I did. I touched him. His fingers, thick and rough, the kind that had held power tools and stroller handles. And fragile hopes all at once, trembled under mine. I brought his hand to my lips and kissed it, gently. He looked at me, startled, and then turned away, the faintest smile hiding in his beard. It was then I remembered. He never said "I love you" when he proposed. He had simply handed me a ring, too shy for words. And I had understood. That night, we went to bed together. No distance between us like usual. No turning our backs and drifting into separate dreams. We lay on our sides, face to face, under the dim light filtering through the curtains. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. I felt his fingertips on my skin like I was 20 again. He leaned forward, slowly, carefully, and kissed my forehead. The gentleness of that gesture undid me. It was like being seen again. Loved again. Not for how I used to be, or how I might become, but exactly as I was now. "You're more tender now than you've ever been," I whispered. He smiled, not with his lips, but with his eyes. That old, familiar softness had returned. And when we kissed, it was not the kiss of young lovers seeking heat and fire. It was a kiss that spoke of memory and forgiveness. A kiss that stitched up every torn moment we had left behind in silence. We didn't rush. There was no urgency in our movements, no feverish need to reclaim lost time. Instead, we touched one another slowly, reverently, as though we were reading a beloved book again for the first time. Tracing every word with our fingers. His lips moved along my collarbone, brushing softly over skin that time had weathered but not ruined. My breath caught, not because of surprise, but because of the depth of it. We had been intimate in so many ways. Over the years, through laughter, through arguments, through shared routines, but this was something else. This was rediscovery. I let my hands explore the familiar curves of his back, the gentle slope of his shoulders. His body had changed, so had mine, but in that moment, I didn't long for what we were. I cherished what we had become. When he touched me, it wasn't to claim. It was to remember, to say with his fingertips what he couldn't say aloud. His kisses deepened, not in haste, but in meaning. And as we moved beneath the covers, I felt every moment of our lives together. Pressed between us, decades of emotion, of holding on and letting go, of growing older. Not apart, but sometimes just quietly. We made love that night. And when it was over, we didn't speak. We didn't need to. We simply lay there, wrapped in each other. A stillness between us that wasn't empty but full, of comfort, of forgiveness, of knowing. Later, I must have fallen asleep. But I woke before dawn. The world outside was still cloaked.